Alright, here is section 4.4 for chapter 4, looking at the protozoa. For the exam questions, what you're going to need to know are, or to be able to do, is list the 3 modes of locomotion by the protozoa. How do these movable, motile creatures get around? And then also be able to explain the cyst stage of a protozoa. And along with this, you need to understand the difference between the vegetative the trophozoid and the cyst stage of a protozoan. Alright, the protozoa are kind of cool. Alright, they're not kind of cool, they are cool. And their name comes from Greek words that mean first animals. And I want to read just a couple of sentences from your textbook. And it says that although their name comes from the Greek for first animals, protozoa are far more from being simple, primitive organisms. The protozoa constitute a very large group of creatures that, although single-celled, have startling properties when it comes to movement, feeding, and behavior. Although most members of this group are harmless, free-living inhabitants of water and soil, a few species are parasites, collectively responsible for hundreds of millions of infections of humans each year. Alright, so these guys are cool, but they also cause problems within the human species. So, those few sentences really talks about what you see right here, all right, in terms of their vast, ubiquitous nature on Earth, and then the problems they can cause within humans. But again, most are harmless. All right, the life cycle and reproduction stage of a protozoan. All right, there are 2 stages or life cycles, and these 2 forms you need to know. All right, there are 2 life cycles, 2 stages, the trophozoid and then the cyst. The trophozoid is going to be the motile feeding stage. All right, so if you see these little creatures moving around in pond water, all right, if you have a microscope and you look at pond water and you see these guys moving around, this is the trophozoid stage. All right, they are active. And in order to stay active, and within this trophozoid stage, they need water, right, moisture, and they need food, a constant supply of nutrients. Then there is the cyst form, or the cyst stage. All right, the cyst stage is a dormant resting stage. So we talked about the endospore of bacteria, how some bacteria can undergo sporulation and develop an endospore when the conditions get harsh. No food, no moisture, extreme heat, extreme radiation, whatever the case may be. And the cyst is very similar, a very similar type of dormant or protective stage, but found within the protozoan. So, the cysts are resistant to heat, to drying, to chemicals. They are then dry, and so they can move or be dispersed by air currents relatively easily. And so therefore it's an important factor in the spread of disease, because then once the cyst gets into a place where there's moisture, a place where there is nutrients, then it can basically convert back or transform into the trophozoid stage, and then cause disease or further replication of that organism. So those are the 2 main words on this slide. Those you will need to know and be able to differentiate for the exam. All right, then here you have table 4.4, and it just looks at the major pathogenic protozoan, the different groups. All right, so you have the amoeboid up top. All right, this has Entamoeba histolytica, which is the organism responsible for amoebiasis, intestinal distress. The reservoir is going to be humans, water, food, things that, or something that you might come down with if you go camping and you use stream water instead of bottled water, or your food isn't cooked properly, you wash your food in the stream water. This parasite can live in streams. Then there are the ciliated protozoa. These guys are kind of cool. Again, you have the short-like, hair-like bristles that are on the outside of the organism, on the exterior. And you can see some of these guys right here along the edge, the cilia. And one major organism that is problematic within humans is this Paramecium Cwi. All right, and this causes intestinal distress, and it's contracted by eating improperly cooked pork and beef. I think really the pigs get the bigger, the bad picture within that disease, but you can actually get it from either organism or either animal, undercooked meat from either source. All right, then there are the flagellated protozoa, which means they have flagellum. And Giardia iambiae causes giardiasis, intestinal distress. Animals, water, food, so streams again, maybe even hot springs. Trichomonas vaginalis, this is considered an STI. And the reservoir are humans. Right? You don't get this from any other place. Trypanosoma brucei, intestinal distress, as well as widespread organ damage. And this can be, or the reservoirs are going to be animals, they're going to be vector-borne, and so that is the way humans contract this disease. Leishmania, leishmaniasis, and this is generally going to be skin diseases, and we won't look at some of these. Again, animal are the sources, sometimes vector-borne, but you can sometimes get this by eating improperly cooked or improperly stored meat, but a lot of times it's also skin lesions. So if you are butchering or skinning a wild animal that might have this disease, right, and you have a sore on your hand or a small cut, the organism can get in there, and that's how you would develop a skin lesion. And then Ampicomplexan protozoan, Plasmodium vivax, this is the organism that causes malaria. All 4 species. There's only 3 here, vivax, falciparum, malariae, and then there's an oval species. The falciparum is the most problematic, the most pathogenic, or the one that causes the most damage within the human. And this is the vector, or the source, can be human because it lives in humans' blood, but it then generally gets transmitted from person to person via mosquito bite. And the species of mosquito is important because not all species of mosquitoes can carry this and transmit it to another person. Toxoplasma gondii causes toxoplasmosis. All right, usually a very mild disease, and it's often found in cats and in rats or mice, rats, and has a non-human life cycle between those 2 organisms, those 2 animals. But if a human gets it, it's typically not that big of a deal, except for one scenario, and we'll talk about that in a couple of slides, or maybe even the next slide. All right, then Cryptosporidium, just some other Ampicomplexan protozoan. The ones down here, the Ampicomplexan, don't move very well. They need a vector. They need movement within the blood, so just basic blood flow. But these guys up here are motile. And here are the three different forms of motility, right? The amoeboid protozoa, they move through the development or through pseudopods, right? Fake feet, what you see here. And so they can simply extend areas of their body, their cell body, and basically grab on. And they can use these pseudopods to move throughout their environment. Again, it has to be water, moisture, in order for them to move. All right, the ciliated, you've got the cilia. And this doesn't look too impressive, but there are some guys that are just covered in cilia, and so they can actually beat those in a very organized fashion and allow for movement. And then hopefully you recognize this one pretty easily, the flagellated. They have flagella. All right, here's this guy. Looks like a little snail with lots of horns or antenna and then a long tail. They're going to use their tail. So the three forms of locomotion: pseudopods, cilia, and flagella. All right, so then looking a little more carefully at Toxoplasma gondii, and this is just some information from the CDC website. It says, toxoplasmosis is considered to be a leading cause of death attributed to foodborne illnesses in the United States. More than 60 million men and women and children in the U.S. carry the Toxoplasma parasite, but very few have symptoms because the immune system usually keeps the parasite from causing illness. So the immune system just keeps it at bay. However, women newly infected with Toxoplasma during pregnancy and anyone with a compromised immune system should be aware that toxoplasmosis can have severe consequences. And with the newly infected the newly infected pregnant women, the issue is that this organism that you see right here can cross the placenta. And if it gets into the developing human, the little the developing human being, it can cause wreak major havoc on that infant in development. And depending on at what stage in gestation, what stage of pregnancy the woman is in, will depend on the severity. And the severity can be death and lead to stillborns or lead to miscarriage. If it is contracted in later in the third trimester or maybe even early in the third trimester, the infant might survive, but there can be very major or very severe consequences, including brain development issues, blindness, deafness. I'm not sure about physical abnormalities or physical development issues, but definitely neurological issues and cognitive, really focused on the brain and the skull development. All right, and the last slide here, these are just a couple of pictures of some of the cilia, ciliated protozoa, because the picture that the textbook gave wasn't too impressive. But here you have Didymium, and you have these tufts of cilia, and this is just a picture of it, a very old picture. But you can see all of the cilia. It just looks like a strip of fur almost. And all of these are going to move, and it causes the cell to move forward. You can also have it allow it to spin. And then this is a Paramecium. A little hard to see, but you can see kind of this halo-like feature around the outside of the cell. And the Paramecium is completely covered in cilia, and it allows it to move in a very organized fashion. It's kind of cool. And then here are two short videos that look at different protozoa and their movement, and it's actually really cool to watch. Neither one of them are very long, so I would recommend that you copy and paste these links and take a look. And that is it for section 4.4.